IVM.
Hello everybody, welcome to episode 85 of Shunya 1. Today we have a really good episode with Chiragh Kirpalani. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to sit in on this episode, but Shiladitya had a really interesting talk with Chiragh about user experience design and the startup culture in a place like Jakarta. So let's get you on with it.
So hey, welcome to our show. Today I'm doing this episode, of course, without Amit. Thanks for that intro. I am here with our guest today. Hey Chiragh, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks, Sheila.
Thanks for finally making it over. I think we've been talking about doing this for a while. And you are, of course, based in Jakarta.
Yes.
And happen to be in Bombay today, which is great.
Yeah.
But you also have roots in Pune and a whole bunch of places in Delhi.
Correct.
So why don't you just give us a quick catch-up on how you sort of started your life in Jakarta and now came and you're back full circle and you're a founder of a fintech startup.
Yes, that's correct. So I'm born and brought up in Jakarta. Then I came down to Pune for studies. I actually went to boarding school before I went to Pune. And then Pune happened. I actually took up communication design and majoring in user experience. And I was in Pune for quite some time. Even after I graduated, I worked with a US-based startup called Fab.com. Was with them from the early days before they started and saw the scale that they went on to about 800 people across different countries and working closely with the CEO and grew the team. Then
all as a UX person, right?
UX, product design kind of a role. Was interesting because I was still in my early 20s and started getting people reporting into me and, what are the challenges that happen. I got multiple promotions in the organization. So it was pretty cool. It was exciting. And then decided that I reached a peak in Fab.com and wanted more challenge. So I started my own startup at that time in Pune, and that's the Pune story.
Wow, interesting. And the fact that you mentioned that you actually did a course in UX or in communication design, right? This must be fairly something which not so many folks did. Especially in Pune or in India, for that matter. Right? When did this course actually come about?
So when we were given an option that in communication design there are 4 streams. One was graphic design, which is the basic, and then there is fashion design, and there's fashion communication, and there was user experience design. I'm like, hey, that sounds interesting. That's something new for me to learn. I'm sure in the future there will be some use cases that will be helpful for my career. I think that's picked up well in the US market as well. There's people just doing user experience design, and I think that's a course that I should go in for. So I opted in, and it was good. It's and fairly 2-3 years after I graduated, the market picked up and everyone started hiring, and there was short of supply of user experience designers in the market in India, especially. People understood that there is beyond tech, there is quality in terms of how interface should be, how language should be in terms of a product and the journey, how to map the flows and so on. So it was exciting,
Yeah, and that's exactly that, right? People in the first wave of startups in India, I think, didn't even focus on design.
Correct.
Or UX for that matter.
Right.
But then the folks like Fab.com, and we've actually had folks here who were also part of those stories.
Nice.
Sort of first built that culture. And then I'm sure then tell us about the startup you did and how you sort of transitioned into this founder role over time.
Sure. So after I left Fab, I started my own startup. It was in Pune. The money, it was out of my savings, and I just wanted to learn. I said, hey, should I go for an MBA or should I start my own startup? So I said, hey, let me start my own startup. This is my learning, my experience. So I got a bunch of 5-6 guys. I rented a space. In those days, there were no co-working space sort of, concept. So we rented out a 1-2 BHK type place and, got some tables and some chairs and started out. Learned a lot of things, in dealing with different side of not just product and design, but it was beyond that. And I think that journey was difficult personally as well. I was actually doing a long distance relationship while running a startup.
Wow.
And my then girlfriend, now wife, was in US, so it was a different time zone, morning for me, night for her, and so forth. So it was challenging, but drained my savings, but learned a lot. And pretty much a year after running that startup, it was into more of content discovery for food in those days. And then I got a message from Times Internet folks at Times Internet, which said that they're hiring kind of a new they hired a new CEO, kind of individual who's coming in from SF, which is Miten Sampath, who's been in the show as well before.
Right.
And he sort of reached out to me after a week later, and he said, "Hey, I want to come down to Pune and meet you." I'm like, "Okay, what's happening?" And
wow, Miten doing the power move on day one.
Yeah, it was, I think, his first move right after 1 week after shifting to Bombay, or shifting to India, sorry.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, yeah.
Awesome. So, and then, of course, that was like an acquisition for you when you sort of moved into the TIL portfolio. And
yes, I think Times also at that time, Times Internet was in the transition phase where they were identifying how to transform to something bigger, larger, and have a good sort of
diversified portfolio,
and have brands that can actually reach out to the mass consumers.
Right. I think I would call it the unbundling of the TIL Times City sort of initial product, right? And
correct.
I think overall the world and India maybe specifically was going through that unbundling phase of classifieds lists going into individual brands and apps and so on. And you played quite a few roles there in various startups which got acquired and rolled into TIL, right? Yeah,
so I was at Times Internet for about close to 2.5, 3 years, and it was an interesting journey as well. Grew over there from, they got me into head the mobile for them for some of their products, which mainly revolved around content, and post that became product head, which had I had about 40, 50 people reporting, and
wow.
It was an interesting evolution for me also, because I think if you look at product as such, there's no such university or courses that teaches you product management.
Nope.
And product management alone comes from different backgrounds, whether that's you see most of tech, QA, and even design evolving themselves to become product managers. So it's an interesting journey from how I was a UX designer, and I became I picked up product and went into that domain, and that's helped me to where I am right now.
And then, of course, you moved back to Jakarta. So tell us a little about, I think this is the first time someone's been on the show here who's actually operating out of and for a market which is not India.
Yeah.
Even though you still, like you say, have roots in Pune, you have a dev team there, but your product is actually for the Indonesian market.
Right.
And you, of course, have a connection as well because you lived there and grew up there. But how did that actually formulate, and what insight did you see to make this happen?
I think I was in Times Internet. I had a good challenging role, and definitely I was growing in the organization. But I visited Jakarta and I saw the market picked up. I saw there was initial wave of internet acquisitions happening in those days. Bigger traditional businesses buying internet companies at that point of time, and we kind of saw the first wave. And I said, hey, the market is now opening up. There are startups coming out. There was a VC mixer that happened in Jakarta, and I think that I went for that. I met a lot of founders. Spoke to them what they were doing, it just gave me a good perspective. And I said, hey, the market is ready. I think the consumer base is large. If you see the population after, China, India, and US, Indonesia is fourth largest market in terms of population. I think consumer base is good. And if you look at Southeast Asia, it's actually Indonesia equals the rest of the market in Southeast Asia as well. So I think it's a large base, and keeping the personal side, of course, my parents were there. I wanted to move back. But I said, hey, this is interesting. And then that's another founder who's running a furniture commerce startup. He introduced me to my co-founder who now is we're on to building Ayopop together.
Nice. And what is Ayopop, and what do you do
Sure.
at Ayopop?
Ayopop is a bill payment app, similar like the early days of how India had its, people starting to pay bills online, mobile applications. So that's what we do. Yeah, and it's picked up well so far. We've been 3 years in running this, and currently, what do I do? I handle operations, product, and overlook the tech. So that's what I do. We're about close to 100 people in the entire Ayopop. So we have 30 folks in Pune, which is the dev team, tech team,
Wow.
and the rest of the guys in Jakarta.
So how come Pune? Again, a personal connection, or?
Yeah, I think I knew some guys. I knew we had a good connection. I have a good connection with Pune, and I had a friend who's a techie as well, who currently is our CTO, and we built around him. So we got him, and he got few folks. So I think that was a starting point. I think we've seen different involvement in terms of hiring as well. So the first few is through connections, then the second wave was through referral, and third wave is by hiring an HR to get that's how we built around.
Awesome. And
Yeah.
of course, I actually want to know what the name means. Because I don't think I have ever found that out.
Yeah, so I think it's we just coined a word, which is IO means come, and pop is just a pop word. So we didn't I believe it can be as generic that tomorrow, if in the early days, if things didn't work out, probably we could switch to something else, and
your product idea could change.
Yeah. So we always believe in just keeping it very generic. Yeah.
Awesome. Going down a little bit more on this specific path you chose, right? Of course, you said as a founder, of course, being a UX or product first person maybe gave you a little bit of perspective on how product should be made, whatever the product is, whatever the domain is. And you said you obviously looked at the market and you saw Indonesia is growing as a base and the market overall. Why choose this fintech thing? I mean, you're not a fintech, you're not a finance background person.
Right.
You're not. I don't think your co-founders are.
My co-founders he was at Lazada, which is now part of e-commerce, which is one of the biggest e-commerce in Indonesia and Southeast Asia. It's now acquired by Alibaba. So different backgrounds. I think what is interesting is that when I shifted back, I had the challenge of I went to my mom then and I said, hey, now I'm here, let me take care of the household bills and all of it. Mm-hmm. And when I went through the journey of paying different bills, different due dates, subscriber IDs, which I don't remember, and the payments is still very broken in the market. So I identified, and we played around with multiple ideas at that time. I said, hey, I found a co-founder, but let's figure out what we can do. And there's no it doesn't mean that I don't come or we don't come from that background that we can't do it. I think we just need to find the right challenge and what excites us. And there was a gap in the market. Felt like, we did a research behind how big the market opportunity is. And we said, hey, this is something that we can go for.
Interesting. And at this stage, right, Indonesia is or was, like you said, already half the market of Southeast Asia, right?
Right.
And generally, the perspective which most, I'm guessing, Indian listeners also have is that they're a little more evolved than India per se. Mm-hmm. From a market point of view, right? I mean, there are more. The internet came first there before us, or am I wrong? Like, I actually want to understand what the reality of
Indonesia
is also.
Yeah, sure. So I think from a consumer perspective, they're more mobile savvy. Mm-hmm. So they spend a lot more time on social media and the number of apps that they download is pretty 8 to 9 apps in average. So I think it's they're very out there. They want to experiment. They want to try out stuff. So that's the challenge in the good side is in Indonesia we have only one script. So it's like, in India you have different languages and scripts and so forth. So I think in Indonesia that's a plus point that we don't have that side. And the payment systems are very different over there. The way that people pay, largely people are still driven by ATM machines in terms of transferring, and we saw that as an opportunity of how can we bring that towards the mobile side.
But coming back to the fact that they are a more mobile savvy audience, and they were hence more mobile savvy before India was, but in a way, India had all these solutions which you are now building, and obviously now there's a lot of competition too.
Correct.
But India probably had this stuff before, right? Did it?
Yeah, no. So India is, from a startup perspective, from a tech perspective, I think India is slightly more evolved. We already, saw, the wave of payments in India much before. I think the gap still exists in Indonesia, and that's what we saw.
Interesting. And now in the 3 years that you've been building, of course, there's competitors. There's, in fact, you're a fintech, so you actually have to deal with even regulation and so much of control the government will want over how you operate. How has that been? I mean, did you know that going in?
I think we definitely had a sense, because it's we're holding money from customer base, which is the Aam Janta. So it's very it's scary because it's a 24-hour operations, as well as it's definitely going to be regulated. But what's nice and interesting is that the Indonesian regulators are very supportive. They've actually been out there to understand what startups want and how can they help. Of course, they have certain restrictions from their side as well. They want their data to be kept in Indonesia, and certain challenges in terms of fintech, certain licenses that we need to obtain, and permits to work around. So I think that has been something that's come into picture. But
nice. And as the audience has grown and as the base has grown, of course, there's more. I'm sure around you there's a lot of innovation happening. What kind of innovative things have you been doing to sort of differentiate?
So I think we've started to understand our audience a little more better. And what's interesting is for us, it's coming from the rural of Indonesia. It's people who are getting exposure to, first time doing transaction online. And I pick up the call sometimes myself and call our users and ask, hey, where are you, and what made you download, and what made you use this transact on Ayopop. And it's interesting, some good insights on in terms of their behavior, and that has helped us to shape up the product as well.
And rural Indonesia is actually a very different thing than rural India, right? India is still this large sort of big landmass, and like you said, we have our own a distribution of languages and cultures.
Right.
You have maybe one large culture and language, but you're literally fragmented in thousands of islands.
Correct. Yeah. So that's more of a challenge in terms of if you're doing e-commerce or logistics. It's still it's very difficult to reach, and that's where I say that if you're doing e-commerce. It takes days for a product from Jakarta to reach the end point, and for us, with being an app which people can do transaction from anywhere, people have to pay the bills. So bills is something Indonesians have to pay at least 5 to 6 bills a month, and currently the use case is that they walk to a convenience store or physical point of payment, and that's where they pay. And what's interesting is different than India. Their electricity is being made prepaid. So you have to pay first and then, recharge your electricity. The government is smart because they didn't have, the collections were becoming a bottleneck, so they made it prepaid.
Wow.
So if in the middle of the night, if your electricity shuts down, so, you have to walk or take a bike and go, a couple of meters or kilometers away to buy, your recharge. And that's a problem. And I think that's...
and instead, you can just open Ayopop.
You can open Ayopop and do it anytime, 24/7. It's that's
amazing. That's actually very interesting. And again, this is something we have seen, but of course with mobile recharge, right? We saw so many companies innovate and sort of expand on that. Very interesting. I'm gonna take a quick break, come back and talk a little more about all these things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another awesome week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you aren't following us on social media, please make sure that you do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Just a couple of notes up front. One is that we're still running our listener survey. That's ivmpodcast.com/survey. The survey is only going to run till the end of the week. So if you want a chance to win that awesome mug that we're giving out, please make sure that you fill out that survey. Also, I wanted to put out a quick reminder that if you're enjoying what you're listening to, please take a screenshot of what you're listening to, tag us on Instagram, and we'll put that in our story so that everybody else can see what you're listening to. Also, please don't forget to put in a comment. On The Scene and the Unseen, Amit Verma is joined by author Tony Joseph, who talks about his acclaimed book, Early Indians. They deep dive into the Harappan times and how ancient history is never as simple as it seems. On Advertising is Dead, Varun's guest is comedian and writer Naveen Richard. They talk about the source material for writing comedy, the web series Better Life Foundation, meme culture, and tongue cleaners. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam is joined by Rahul Jain, head of Edelweiss Personal Wealth Advisory. They talk about wealth management and his future in India. On Paperback, Anirudh Kanisetti joins Satyajit and Rachita to reflect on how archaeology led to the creation of many rituals. On Know Your Qanoon, Ambarana is in conversation with Abha Singh and they discuss legal procedures involved in crimes against women. On our Marathi podcast Golgappa, Trupti is joined by the hosts of How to Citizen, Meghnad and Shreyas. They talk about growing up in Nagpur and their show. On Geek Fruit, Tejas, Jishnu and Abbas dissect the latest film entry into the Marvel canon, Captain Marvel. And with that, let's continue on with your show.
Hey, welcome back, guys. Talking a little more about your approach and what you're doing specifically different with Ayopop. Like you were just explaining how it's essentially a place for people to just... It's so much more convenience, right?
Yeah.
But going a little deeper, what's your unique take on the approach you have?
Yeah, I think what we've identified is that, every merchant who... They have to collect money from their, subscriber base. And what we're doing is we're going to them and saying that, hey, look at us as your collection partner, online collection partner. And they do have marketing spends. What we're saying that, hey, allocate your marketing spend to us and we'll make sure that your collections is much faster, much easier. We send the reminders on behalf of you and so on. So I think that has picked up really well. We've seen even from state-owned government, organizations that needs to collect money faster in terms of there's a private insurer, there's a mandatory government insurance which is rolled out to across Indonesia. These guys have enough subscribers, and what we need to do is how to work closely with them and target them and convert them into Ayopop users.
So you're saying you're actually doing marketing also for your merchants, the B2B folks, in a way.
In a way. So what we've changed the first 2 years we were going, let's target customers and consumers directly. But in this year, what we're doing is, hey, let's work closer with our merchants who are already there, which are already, we have a large number of, in terms of assortment, we have a complete assortment in Indonesia in terms of collecting the bills, right from insurance to, TV to internet bills to whatever bills that exist. So we're going to those merchants and we're saying, hey, look at us as your partner. And how can we actually work closely, understand your KPIs, and how can we actually make that work to collect faster and better?
Right, because if you think about it, everyone who's paying a bill in this case through Ayopop is already a user of these services or these companies.
Correct, and they also have they have a pool which pays late, or there's people who sort of kind of go lost and they are subscribers but they haven't paid for a long time period of time. So, like traditional collection business, similar like that, we've just taken the approach online and we're saying like, hey, look at us as that. We'll send the reminders. We would, we know some data sets that, the user, the behavior and how can we, and maybe he pays this and he can turn to become a new subscriber for you. So we're kind of, approaching it a little differently in terms of bill payments.
That's interesting. So you're actually using a lot of, so again, you're using data, you're using all the tech available to you to sort of solve this better, and that's essentially what the startup is about, or any startup is about. But it's interesting you say this, because you have, in this domain of bill payments in general, you have this captive audience of all the subscriber bases of all the merchant partners that you have. So potentially it's that many users you could get.
Absolutely, and I think we're looking at how can we tap into those guys which already exist and just help the merchants to, get their money faster.
Don't you face pushback from, let's say, the merchants who want people to sort of recharge on their own site? Or is their site that bad? Or it's just not
No, I think, within those, they have different departments and different KPIs for different, things. So I think everyone is having Go Digital motto in the whole country. Right. They love working closely with fintech. They need to. There is a mandate by the government as well, which is pushing really, really well. As thank you to the government and the initiatives that they've been taking. So I think, that's a little bit of where.
Okay. Because I think I've seen this, or we've heard this in let's say any aggregator sort of business, right? If you're a hotel aggregator, or if you're a airline aggregator, and so on. Obviously, it's a great business to be in, but it's also that the individual brands always try to sort of get people to buy from them direct. Right. It's sort of an emerging story.
Yeah.
Probably much later than after the aggregator is well established. But do you see that?
No, I think we look at our vendor partners or merchant partners. They don't have the tech capabilities. They don't have the speed that we can go for. We take that as an advantage and we say, hey, we can do much more with data. We can do much more with tech. We can look at us as a partner rather than Indonesia is very relationship built, right? Sheila, you know about it. You've been visiting a couple of times now.
Yeah.
So I think it's very relationship based. It's that's one of the difference between India and Indonesia. I think in Indonesia you can eat and dine even with like we do meet the government folks. We meet the state-owned CEOs and directors and so forth. It's much more accessible than it is in India. India is more challenging. So I think. That's a key advantage in Indonesia, definitely.
Very, very interesting. So, as a market, right, going back to Indonesia itself being such a large and up-and-coming market, and I know a lot of Indian companies are looking to go there, or in fact, just like you, there are Indonesian companies who have back offices here.
Yes.
From a tech hiring perspective, do you see that as a challenge there? Like, how's the skill set of tech there? Or is it more consumer based? That's of course there, but what about the founders and startups themselves?
No, I think, Indonesia has some good technology, tech guys as well. There's institutes which are, graduating a couple of tech guys. Mm-hmm. The only thing is there's a number of startups that the demand is higher than the supply at this point in time. So I think whoever's there, they get poached very easily, or they jump, jobs and switch places, and also because of that thing, the salaries have increased and so forth. But quality-wise, I feel like it's pretty much the same at par. And I think every startup that has, whether that's us or whether that's the rest of the guys who have offices in India. We have two teams, so we have the India team and the small tech team in Jakarta as well, supporting each other. So I think that's how they work.
Yeah, and why I'm saying is because maybe India sort of had a little bit of advantage because we were always the the offshoring
Yes,
country, right?
that's
We
correct.
always build a techie base anyway.
Yes.
Now those guys join startups instead of the
Of the MNCs.
Yeah, exactly, right?
Yeah.
So we had that, whereas Indonesia probably didn't sort of have that.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I think now the younger generation who are graduating and all, they're directly to the startups. They're like, hey, I want jobs at startups. And
Correct.
they're very excited to
Correct.
Yeah.
And also, coming back to actually the consumers, right? Culturally, this is again something which I have seen in my recent trips to Jakarta as well.
Right.
The market has there's a inclination for the consumer to actually spend more or spend for whatever they want, right?
Right.
Is that a cultural thing you think, which
Yeah.
is opposite of what Indians are save more?
Yeah, no, Indians are very like, hey, budget and saving, and let me keep it for, rainy days in the future.
Correct.
And
Correct.
beti ka shadi and, and all those things. So I think Indonesians are very different on that side. They live for today. They live they live weekly.
Wow.
What they say is, Saturday night is the night before Sunday, so let's spend whatever we have and just be happy. So that's a little bit of their the way they live.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they don't think about tomorrow. That's savings is something that's not inculcated in the
Right.
consumers.
Right.
Mindset.
And see, again, you have a undue advantage of sort of having both sides, right? You're Indian, born there, raised there, come back here, go back. So how has it been seeing this sort of dual...
No, I think it's great. Both the markets are India is definitely a huge consumer base, and I've seen the wave here, and I want to play home ground advantage because I'm born and brought up in Jakarta, and I think even in Indonesia, there's very few Indonesians who take risk. So I think. More Indonesians should take risk and become entrepreneurs.
apart from spending everything on Saturday.
Apart from spending in, don't spend your VC money. That's.
But would you ever take your product back here? You think Ayopop could work in India or some version of it? Have you ever thought of that?
I think definitely yes, but I mean it can work if we had to. But it's the gap to market is far away right now. I think there's enough players here who are doing stuff, and they've also evolved in terms of what they're doing. And there is the UPI is here, which has changed the game.
Right.
I think Indonesia is yet to see something of that sort. So I think the payment space is still evolving. I think it's still very early days, even though there are even a couple of players in the payments side in Indonesia here.
All right. And coming back to your actual team setup and how you've sort of maintained this back office Pune team, which is also growing, right? You said
Correct.
it's a third of your company now.
Yeah.
What's your take on, like, again, Pune versus Bangalore maybe? Have you ever had the need to sort of branch out? How is the tech scene in Pune? Because even I have very few techie friends in Pune who actually don't, if they're listening, they don't show up for this show enough.
Okay.
But
No, so I think we sort of we found one person and we worked around that person in
and they don't want to move, basically.
And they don't want to move. They're happy. And
that's also a
I think
Pune trait.
that's a Pune trick. Actually, to keep them also, it's good retention. So I think the good side is in Bangalore, people get poached here left and right, and there's a really large number of startups there. I think the first wave for us was to identify more techies from Pune itself to start hiring, and then we looked out to Bombay. Because Bombay is still easier for people to move to Pune, and then we started looking at Delhi, and we have some, we have about 4 guys in out of the 30 guys who've moved from Delhi to Delhi NCR to Pune, and I think Bangalore is the next one. But I think it's difficult to get Bangalore people to shift down to Pune because there's enough. And I mean, of course, I think salary competence and other things are still very different.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think it's normalizing to a certain extent.
It is.
It's not crazy it's not going crazy year on year anymore. I think.
Thank God.
It's,
There was a point where everyone was
Exactly, right? And do you see that happening back at Jakarta, though?
It is actually in Indonesia right now with the tech scene. It is so
Yeah.
it's inflated right now because of
And you have some seriously big tech hiring folks even there, right?
Correct,
I mean,
correct,
all the
correct.
big names of
big names, all the unicorns.
Yeah,
Four
yeah.
unicorns there, and
four unicorns there
yeah,
actually.
yeah, yeah.
Wow, I never thought so. But yeah, so I think India also just has about 10, or do we even have 10? I'm not sure.
Or maybe more.
Or maybe
I don't
more.
know. No idea. Yeah, but let's see.
But let's
Yeah,
see.
but Indonesia is picking up. So I think in a very short span of time, we've seen some really huge
Awesome.
growth. Yeah.
And in and around that Southeast Asian market, right? What's your take on the fact that like there are richer countries in that space? Let's say Singapore.
Right.
Let's say I think Thailand as well.
Mm-hmm.
Economy-wise, they are maybe more powerful in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
but the action is in Indonesia.
Yeah,
It's just population. Is it anything else?
I think the fact that 4 unicorns have grown out of Indonesia in the region comparatively, I think says huge about the space and the market. If you look at Singapore, I mean, something like B2B businesses would really flourish well in Singapore. But in terms of consumer base, I think it's everyone from VCs to everyone's looking at Indonesia at this point in time.
Wow. You want to do a shout out to what kind of folks should join your team?
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean we're hiring for different roles from back end, front end, and even VP of engineering, please.
Oh, wow!
So we're looking out. Please do reach out.
And how do folks get in touch with you or the team? Like, what's your deal? Are you on Twitter? Can you
I'm
give a
on
shout out?
Twitter. It's C Kirpalani, Kirpalani. Yeah, that's
Right.
my handle. You can reach out to me there or info@ayopop.com. AYOPOP.com, so that's easy.
And you're already on our Slack channel.
I'm already on your Slack channel, so yes,
Yeah.
definitely can reach
So-
out on Slack channel of Shunya 1 as well.
Absolutely. And for folks who don't know that yet, go to ivmpodcast.com/Shunya1 and request an invite to join the Slack channel, and we'll invite you right in. Thanks so much for doing this, Chiragh. I mean, this was really great. I think we got some really cool stuff about, especially what you're building in Indonesia and the market there, and how you will keep always have Pune and India as another base. Very interesting there. We hope to keep hearing from what you guys are doing, and of course keep listening to the show as well, and do share what you can with all our listeners.
Definitely. Thanks a lot for inviting me. Thanks, Sheila.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey everybody, we have a brand new podcast series by Bloomberg Quint called BQ Conversations, which covers a range of topics like business strategies, latest trends in technology such as cybersecurity and artificial intelligence, and also personal finance. Episodes are out on the IVM Podcast app or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Filter coffee is a fascinating beverage. You need to pick the right beans, blend them in the right proportion, roast them to perfection, and slow brew at the right temperature to get the perfect cup. Which is exactly like great conversations as well. You need to track down the most interesting minds, get them into their zone, and settle down for an unhurried, unscripted chat. And coffee for me is always, always, always best enjoyed with friends. I'm Karthik Nagarajan, and do share my table as I meet some of the most interesting people I know and sit them down for a strong cup of coffee and an even stronger conversation. Join me every Wednesday for a freshly brewed episode. This is not frappe. This is the Filter Coffee Podcast.